Hey, welcome back to another TouchDesigner tutorial. I'm so excited to finally get to launch this free open source plugin for TouchDesigner that allows us to run Google's MediaPipe machine learning models with no installation, and it's all GPU accelerated, and it's going to run on any computer. So this actually gives us access to real-time machine learning models like face tracking that can be mapped onto different 3D models. It gives us access to hand tracking, pose tracking, object tracking, multi-person face detection, image classification, as well as image segmentation. For this project, I teamed up with Dom Scott, who's based out of Toronto, and the two of us have been working nonstop to try and get this plugin working for the TouchDesigner community. So we're really excited to see what you'll make, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Dom Scott. I'm a visual artist in Toronto, and I specialize in interactive light and video installations. So I've been super excited to implement MediaPipe into TouchDesigner and see what fun tools it gives us to play with and what creative things people come up with.
This project started off as just a single body tracking component, and it wouldn't be anything close to what it is today without Dom's help. So that's been such a fun collaboration, and I just want to give a huge shout out to Dom for all the work that they've done on this project. And if you want to support them, I think the best way to do that, I'm going to put a link to their website in the description. Go check out their work. They're doing great stuff. For this next part, I'm going to show you how to get the project up and running. So we're going to head on over to the GitHub. I'm going to put a link to this URL in the description, as well as a link up above. So once you land on the website, we actually have a lot of info down here, kind of diving into the setup for the project, information on all the individual plugins, as well as how to feed your own video device into the component, and also information on how we develop the plugin itself. So if you wanted to contribute to it in some way, we have documentation there. A quick way to support the project is to just give it a star on GitHub. If you run into any issues with the component, you can go to the Issues tab over here, and you can actually file a new issue and make sure to include things like screenshots of what's happening in your project. Please list the operating system that you're running, the version of the operating system, as well as the version of TouchDesigner that you're running. That can be super helpful. So you can put in a title, comments, you can drag and drop images into it as well, and that will help us improve this over time. But to actually just use the plugin, head on over to this release section over here, and the version will continue to change. We're going to continue to add new updates to this as MediaPipe adds new features to their machine learning models. And if you click here, there is a button that says release.zip. You're going to want to click on that. Make sure that you're not downloading the full source code. It's not actually going to work out of the box if you download the entire zip of the source code, because that contains the development environment that we use to create the actual plugins. So go ahead and click on this release zip. It'll go ahead and download. And then you can unzip it, and you'll get these individual toxes that if you wanted, you could actually just drag into your projects. And we did a huge push to actually take the different machine learning models and embed them into the TouchDesigner components. So the main one here is actually this MediaPipe tox. This houses all the machine learning models. So you'll see it's quite big, but this actually means that the entire project is going to work offline. You can go ahead and open up the project. So the main part of this project is this MediaPipe component. And this is actually the component responsible for running the different machine learning models. So if you click on it and go over to the parameters page, you'll see that you have options to toggle on and off the different machine learning models, as well as display the different overlays of those models. This is actually just outputting the raw data. And each one of these components over here are examples that we've created that show how to basically take that data and then use it within TouchDesigner. And these also have some nice helpers that we've included to just make the process really easy to start using that data in TouchDesigner. The first thing I want to start off with is just showing you how to hook up the component. So when you open up the project, you can select your webcam from over here. And if it doesn't load by default, you can always hit this little reset button. And this will restart the machine learning models and all of the underlying systems. You will most likely not need to change these. Under the hood, this is actually running as a website, but everything is stored internally. And so these are some of the different parameters that tell the network where to look. Below are all of the different toggles for turning the different models on and off. So I wouldn't recommend running all of them at the same time. Depending on the system that you have, it might be able to handle it, but I'd recommend, only running a couple. And then you also have the ability to show the different overlays here. So this can be helpful for kind of debugging in this side of things before it gets rendered into TouchDesigner. Along the top here, you have access to all the different custom settings within each one of the machine learning models. So for every toggle over here, we have different customization. So for example, you can change the different settings available for the image classification, the image segmentation, all those different things. Let's go ahead and dive into the components. I'm going to show you how to work with the different machine learning models within TouchDesigner. For this next part, Dom's actually going to walk you through the setup for the face tracking components.
So let's take a look at facial landmarks. There are a number of bits of data that come out of the MediaPipe model that you can play with. So I'm going to give you a very quick overview of what's there. So first things first, you want detect facial landmarks turned on. I would say probably not the overlays, but it's useful when you're getting started to make sure it's working. If you take a look in the settings up here for facial landmarks, at the moment it's set to 2, and you might notice it's a tiny bit jittery on my face. If you drop this down to 1, the component will reload, but then you should get much smoother tracking on the face when it does come back together again. In general, for all of the things in MediaPipe, try and keep them as minimal as you need, because everything you add will add extra CPU and GPU processing time. So let's, now you can see the face is a little smoother. The face tracking component here takes the JSON that comes from MediaPipe and just turns it into useful things. So you need this to start with, and you can check that it's working with the mask up here. Then there are a number of things that come out. So the top on top is this overlay here, which you can see already. We then have a blend shapes chop, which is 54 channels of things you can use to animate the face or to check what the face is doing. We'll go into more about that in a moment. We have the facial points, so this is all 258, I think, of these dots, all in a chop, so you can take the coordinate information to do things with. We then have a SOP for each of the masks themselves, the actual thing that it's tracking on your face. We have these things called transformation matrices, and we have one for each of the faces as well. So what do all of these things do? If we go take a look inside the face filter example, we're implementing all of them to give you an example of what goes on. Let's start with the SOPs, because they're fairly obvious. As you can see, it's the face here moving away. We have it rendered through a geometry and a camera, just like any other SOP. And then we have an example here that uses one element of the transformation matrix, which is the rotation. So we're using that to make the texture that's on your face move in time with your head rotation. So if you take a look here, the texture moves and rotates at the same time as your face does. So that's the first thing, the SOPs and what you can do with those. This is the facial blend shapes, and you can see all these moving around here. So the couple of interesting ones in here could be eye blink, so you can check whether people's eyes are open or how open people's eyes are. You also get looking left, looking right, and some other ones in there as well about whether your cheeks are moving and other fun things. So in this scenario, we have jaws open, closed. So when you do a goldfish, it changes the intensity of the texture there as well. So that's some of the examples of what you can do. If you wanted to build a puppet face, you can do that. Great thing for the blend shapes is either look at the chop channels that are here to see what they do, or you can go look on the MediaPipe website and see the documentation about what they are. The next area we're going to look at is the transformation matrix. So the idea with the transformation matrix is that you can use this canonical face model as a reference point and put a piece of other geometry, a 3D object of any kind, in the same place as the canonical face model. And as long as those two line up, you can apply the transformation matrix, and in real time, it will move them so that they line up with your face. So you can see the rendered result I've got here of this little halo ring. And then we can see that it moves in time with your face. So that's pretty good fun. And that is a quick overview of the facial landmark tracking.
Let's go ahead and take a look at the hand tracking next. So I'm going to go over to the MediaPipe component, turn off the other models, and then just turn on detect hands. The hand detection actually has the ability to pick the total number of hands that can be tracked in real time. So there's also a confidence threshold. And what that allows the machine learning model to do, if it's not confident enough that a hand is detected in the frame, it just won't render it. It won't output that data. If you kind of have like a hand popping into the background, you might want to change these thresholds here. You can also change the number of gestures that are being output. So for example, if you only want to just track for a single hand, you could change this to 1. That would also free up some resources. Similarly, for the total number of hands, if you only want to track 1 hand, you could do that as well. And I just want to point out the different outputs here. So the first one, this is actually going to render the different points. The next one, this will give you all the different information about your left and right hands. So you see we have all the different digits, and they're separated by H1 and H2. So for example, if we wanted to get your right pointer finger as a data point, we could connect a select chop, and then we can filter this down in the channel names by getting H1 for hand 1, colon, index finger, underscore tip, star. And so the star is going to give us access to any of the coordinates that are available for it. And what's really cool is that we get the X, Y, and Z data, and it's super, super accurate. Yeah, so then you could kind of do whatever you'd like with this specific data. The X, Y positions are normalized from 0 to 1. So the next one over here is all of the different hand data, but organized in a format that's really easy to instance with. So if I place down a circle, SOP, for example, I'm going to right click on the end here and place down a geometry. And maybe we're going to take the radius of this circle and make it much, much smaller. And then from there, what we could do is we could go over to the instance section on the geo, turn it on, and we can drag and drop this chop on, and we can get the X, the Y, and the Z data. And now this geometry should, if we place a camera and a render top, and also add in a material, maybe just a constant material for now. I'm going to drag and drop this onto the geometry to give it some lighting. And I'm going to take the radius of this, maybe make it 0.01, 0.05. And you can see we get this little sphere here in the center. But now when we put our hands in, we get all that rendered information. Awesome. The next one down is actually some like helper data that I've used in a lot of different projects. And so generally, if you're making an installation, it can be really helpful to get the overall motion of someone's hand or arm. And so what I've done here is like, this isn't the genuine velocity, but it's helpful to think about that way. This will capture the overall motion of someone's hand movement and map it into a range that's helpful to apply to different visuals or audio. So you can see we can get that velocity for our left hand, for our right hand, and then we also have the distance between our hands. Next up is our gesture data. You can see here we have peace sign for victory. For our hand 1, we have thumbs up, thumbs down, pointing up, open palm, closed fist, and then I love you. And then also a recognizer for none, but also if your hand's out of the frame, it detects nothing. And it does it for both hands, which is huge. And then the last part over here is a SOP that will render the actual hand data. And then we split these into left and right hand, so that way you can have a unique piece of geometry for each. Next up, I want to look at the pose tracking. So I'm going to go over to the model, turn on detect poses. One thing to note too is that you can use different models. So if you go over to the pose section, you can see here that there's a light, full, and heavy model that you can use. So if I increase this to heavy, it uses a larger machine learning model, which is going to take more compute power. The other part too is that there's these min and max confidence thresholds. So if it thinks that you're not in the frame, like the machine learning model needs to have a certain confidence level to think that it's actually seeing a person there. You can change this confidence level depending on how responsive it is. And you can see the first parameter here, we get our rendered top. The next parameter is all of our joint data. So what's really great is that this model actually works with the X, Y, and Z position. So you can kind of see if I put my hand off in the distance here, we can get things that are closer or further away from the camera. I'd say this model is quite jittery. I think that the MediaPipe team is working on an update for this. I have another project in my Patreon that uses a different machine learning model. It's using MoveNet, and I think that model is a lot more stable. So if you do want to have very accurate pose detection, I'd recommend using that for now. The next parameter is, again, set up so that you can easily instance the data. You can see we have the X, Y, and Z positions available. And then the last section, this is similar to the hand tracking where we can get the velocity of your left wrist, your right wrist, as well as the distance between your hands. One thing that I would recommend doing, because this data is very jumpy, it can be really helpful to place down a filter. And you can see here, just even looking at how this data is moving around, it really smooths things out quite a bit. And if you happen to be using the actual rendered output here, and let me show you what that looks like inside the component as well. So here, I'll open this up so that we can view it. I think all the way back here to the far left, I will insert, after this DAT2, I'm going to insert a filter. The main thing though is you want to remember to turn on the filter per sample. And you can see that, with the filter at 1 second, it really smooths out the jumpiness, but it really slows it down quite a bit. So there's kind of a trade-off of like adding easing, but then also, how those points will react to your movement. All right, next up is the object tracking. So I'm gonna go ahead and go back to this model. I'm going to go ahead and turn on detect objects, and you'll see that there are actually a number of different machine learning models that are available for the detection. If you want to learn more about these models, we have links to the different MediaPipe pages under each component. So if you go over to object tracking, you can get a link directly to the object tracking guide within MediaPipe. So if you scroll down, you can see information around the different types of models, as well as the trade-offs between those different detection models. So this one gives us access to, first, a list of the X, Y, width, height, and score for whatever it thinks is being detected. So if I kind of move out of the frame, it'll start detecting the TV. This is set up to use for instancing. It's also set up to output this rendered top as well. And then lastly, the information around the different objects that it is currently detecting. So right now, it has a pretty high confidence that it's detecting a person. The TV kind of keeps popping in and out of the frame, so that's why it keeps changing. But then if I were to move out of the frame more, that should be more accurate there. These will kind of pop in and out, so it was a little tricky to put this into chop data because these will constantly change to different parameters. But hopefully you can use this to kind of detect what's going on in the environment. Okay, next up is the face detection. So this is the detect faces over here. And this one won't give you as accurate of positions as the actual face landmarks model. But the really nice thing is that this can actually detect up to 10 people. Right now, the model is trained specifically for faces that are at a close distance, but there's an update coming to MediaPipe where there should be another model coming out that should be able to detect people that are further away. Similarly, there's also a min confidence that you can use to ensure that the model is only picking up on faces at a certain confidence level. So here with this data, you can see the first parameter is instance data that you can use to render the different points. The second one is actually chop data for all of the 10 potential people that could be rendered. So you can see here we have them laid out as P1, and we give you access to the different data points for the X and Y positions, as well as we give you access to the top that is rendering out those points as well. Next up is the image classification. There are a number of different models that are available for the image classification. I'd recommend going over to the MediaPipe website and checking out the overview for the image classification. So this will give you some info as well on the different type of models that are available, and again, the different trade-offs between those models. So here you can see we basically are just giving you a big list of all the different categories that it thinks are showing up. It also isn't very confident about any of the things that are in the frame. Like maybe if I hold up like a notebook or something, but they all should be organized from kind of a confidence level. Maybe, oh, okay, it's got coffee mug, nice. But basically the other thing that we have available here, this actually has 1,000 different chop outputs. We actually have a chop channel for every potential item that could show up. And we're basically live updating the score for how confident the model thinks that it's seeing that. There's like so many elements, you can't even really zoom in to select one of those out to figure out what the name is. So if you go inside, we actually have a big table in here that you can scroll through and you can figure out the specific names if you want to select those channels out of this chop, because the list is quite long. I also, on this specific component, put in a toggle that limits the total number of outputs that are going to get put into this table right here. So if you only want like the top 10, you can limit that. It just kind of makes it a little bit easier to work with. Or if you want the top 100, and I think it goes up to 1,001 right now. The last piece that we can play around with is the image segmentation. So if you have another model that's running, what I'd recommend doing for the image segmentation is to actually turn off show overlays, because we need to get the live video from this component piped in. For this part, go ahead and turn on image segmentation. There's actually a number of different models that are available. And so here for this segmentation, if you're in this selfie multi-class, I think this is by far the best one. This will give you access to, for example, like hair segmentation, general body segmentation. It'll detect your face as well as your clothing. So let's say we wanted to really quickly make a little filter for our shirt. What I could do is maybe take this shirt and I could connect a noise to it. And in the output, I'm just going to multiply the noise with this layer. And I'm also going to go in and turn this into a 32-bit float. And I'm going to connect it to a channel mix, so that way I can remove the black background here. So in the alpha, I'm going to go to 0 to kind of remove that black background. And then I'm going to go ahead and select this video layer. And we basically want to take this channel mix and layer it on top. So I'm going to connect this to an overtop, and we get this overlay. And the last thing I want to do is maybe just turn off the monochrome so we can get some color, and then animate this with time. So I'll go into the transform section of the noise, type in ABS time.seconds, and now we've got a little video overlay. And you can do something like that for any of these different textures. The other thing that I want to point out here is that if you want very accurate background cutout for this component, what you can do is go over to the MediaPipe model. If you're on the selfie segmentation class, there's this mode that says show multi-class background only. If you turn this on, it'll basically give you just the background cutout and then layer it with the video frame here. So you'll want to make sure that this video device in is set to the same camera as the MediaPipe component. And the reason that we do this is that we want to make sure that if there's any delays between the input video frame and how long it takes the machine learning model to process the background cutout, we want to make sure that we can sync that. If you look at this component up at the top, this will let us know how much of a delay or how many milliseconds it took the model to process the background. And we can basically look that far back into the past to make sure that the cutout is lining up with the current video frame. This is great because normally this type of background segmentation was only available on the NVIDIA devices. So I'm really excited that you can actually use this on any computer. So I'm going to quickly show you how to take any movie file and pass that into this MediaPipe component in case you want to run any of these different models on video input instead of just your webcam. I have a specific way that I'm going to do this setup on Mac, and there's an easier process on Windows that Dom is going to show you. I'm going to go ahead and drop in a movie file that has a person in it, And what we can do is we can actually connect this to this spout siphon out. And I'm going to open up an application called OBS. I'm going to put a link to the OBS application in the description. So once you open up OBS and get it installed, you can click this little plus icon here, and you should see this drop down if you're on Mac for this siphon client. And if we add this in, I can select this TD siphon spout out, hit OK, and then we're going to resize this to fill our display or to whatever resolution that you want. And I'm going to go ahead and start a virtual camera. And what this is going to do is it's going to basically start taking this video feed and it's going to create a virtual camera for us that we can then pick up in TouchDesigner. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to go over to the MediaPipe component, and over here under the camera, I'm going to select OBS virtual camera. It looks like it's processing, but the one thing that we'll need to do is make sure that we get this rendered into the right position. So I'm going to open up and view this because I kind of scaled this to a resolution that's not the same as the input video. So I'm gonna kind of need to nudge it around a little bit. So I'm gonna keep this layered on top, and then let's go ahead and kind of nudge this around a little bit. So I'm gonna probably scoot this to the right a little bit, and that way we can get it kind of lined up. An easier way to do this is to make sure that the resolution of your OBS system over here has the same resolution. So you can go into the video and you can specify your base canvas resolution here, and you would want to make sure that that matches the resolution of your camera, and then it should auto fit for that. So another thing to note is that this will also work with the different machine learning models. So for example, if we're running the object or the face tracking and things like that, like this is now running off of that video. Dom is going to show another setup. So if you're on Windows, he's going to show you how to basically map the video from Windows into MediaPipe as well.
So the MediaPipe component only takes a webcam source as an input. So in order to get video from TouchDesigner into MediaPipe, we need to be a little bit sneaky. And we can do that with Spout. And if you're on Windows, you can use SpoutCam, which takes a Spout video stream and turns it into a webcam. We have it set up like that in the demo tow file, but if you want to get it working on your machine too, you're going to need to do a couple of things. So the first one is to download Spout from the website. Specifically, you want SpoutCam, which is this second one here. You can click the download link. That will take you to GitHub. You download the zip file, and inside the zip file is a file you can run called Spout Settings. It doesn't need to be installed. You just run it, and it will pop up with the settings menu. So once you have the SpoutCam settings open here, you pick your frame rate. I probably just want 30 frames a second for what I'm doing. You set the starting resolution to whatever. For ease of use, I would suggest you leave it as active sender, so then it will be whatever the resolution is that you're sending it from TouchDesigner. And then you set the starting sender name here. So by default, the spout output in TouchDesigner is called TD-spout out. So if you set it to that, it will work. So then all you have to do is click register here, and then you will get the message saying it's been successful, and it's now a webcam that you can use within MediaPipe. So you can close out of that once that's registered. So here in the drop-down list of devices in MediaPipe, you'll have SpoutCam as an option. And to send video to it, you take your video device in. So I've got my webcam here. This is my USB webcam. You send it into a new siphon spout top, and then TD siphon spout out. And as long as it is active, that will get sent to SpoutCam, and then it will appear in your MediaPipe. Yeah. So we have it here.
Thanks again for following along. We're really excited to see what you'll make using this plugin. The best part about working on something like this is seeing what everyone can create using it. So keep us updated. We'd love to see what you're working on. I just want to say, yeah, huge shout out to Dom for all the hard work that they've put into working on this component. And again, if you want to support them, I'm going to put a link to their website in the description. If you would like to support me and this channel, the best way to do that is through my Patreon. So I'll have a link to that in the description as well. I'm going to have some follow-up videos where I'm going to go through and build out some different interactive content using these plugins. So if you want to check those out, consider subscribing to the channel. And thanks again. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.